Hola a todos. Buenos días. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. It's Ollie here. You should be able to see a picture of me on the screen, holding my hands out in front of me. Hopefully, the sound and the screen are working okay. You should have a little chat box down in the corner of your screen. I'd be grateful if you could just take a second to let me know that you can hear me and see me okay. Just go ahead and type in something to let me know that you can, that the technology is all working properly. And then as soon as we have confirmation of that, we can get started. Very excited about the class tonight. We've got lots to get through. Great. Hi, Graham, Ivan, or Ivan, Viv, Lynn, Justin, Sylvia, Jonah. Hi, how's it going? Hi, everybody. Yeah, the image is still at the moment. It will move. It will move in due course, but not just yet. Fantastic, everybody's here. So welcome, everybody, to this online class, webinar, whatever you'd like to call it. Super excited to have you here. The title of the call is, in Spanish, Without Getting Trapped Forever at the Intermediate Plateau. Okay, so we're aiming at intermediate level learners here. If you're a complete beginner in Spanish, I mean, you're more than welcome to stay and listen. The information you get tonight will serve you well, but perhaps not just yet. But it'll be good information for the future, at least. Now, if you do have any trouble during the class with audio or video, the best thing to do is simply to log out and log back in again. That's the best thing to do. That usually clears up the problems, and technical problems do happen from time to time. There's not much we can do about it, unfortunately, but hopefully we should have no problems. I'd also ask that you give me your full attention, because if you're going to spend, I aim to run for about 45 minutes to an hour at most, just to give you an idea of the expectations here. But again, I don't want you to waste your time, and so the best way to make sure that you get the most out of this session is to shut down any distractions you might have. So turn off your phone, get rid of the cat, turn off your email, whatever else you have to do. That way I can be confident that you're going to get the most out of this tonight. Also, I've got a very special bonus for those of you guys who stay until the end. I'm sure you know the feeling, as you've been studying Spanish for a while now. I'm sure you know that feeling of your study being a little bit disorganized. When you kind of sit down to study one day, what am I going to do today? Take my textbook? Am I going to do listening? Or so what I'm going to send you, if you stay to the end, is this very helpful weekly plan. Now, it's very simple. It's just a sheet of A4, but it's what I use every week to plan out my study, to make sure that I actually make the most of my week. Because when you plan stuff out, you're far more likely to actually do it. So hopefully this will help you along the way. So, are you really capable of speaking Spanish fluently? I'm sure you've asked yourself this before. When you first made the decision to learn Spanish, I'm sure that you had certain dreams. I'm sure that you wanted to speak Spanish fluently. You wanted to talk like a native. You didn't want to be the Brit abroad, as we say in the UK, that person that just goes abroad and speaks English. Perhaps if you're living abroad right now, you had dreams of integrating into the local community. But it probably hasn't been plain sailing since you began. It never is, really. You may have been studying Spanish for a number of years. You may have used endless books and materials, taken lots of lessons with different teachers. And you probably felt like you were learning quickly at first, but you've become slightly stagnated, and the progress that you're making in your Spanish is not what it used to be. And you might be feeling frustrated. Well, you are well and truly in the intermediate plateau. It happens to everybody in every language that they learn. And in order to break through the intermediate plateau, I'm not going to lie, it is hard work. It does take work. Okay, but if you want to be able to speak Spanish fluently. I'm sure you're not shying away from that hard work. What I'm going to offer you tonight is a clear path through this plateau and upwards towards fluency, so that you know exactly how to do it and that you won't be alone on the journey. Now, what makes this different? Why should you pay any attention to me? And that would be a fair question. You've probably met people before who are naturally gifted at languages. Maybe you thought that you weren't cut out for this, or maybe you thought you're even too old. It's a common thing to think. Well, you know, there are a lot of Spanish courses out there. I've seen hundreds of them. Mostly they focus on beginner's Spanish, and I think because that's, in a way, that's the easy bit. You know, you've already done that. You've got through the beginner stage of Spanish, right? And what's striking is that not many people take on the task of teaching intermediate to advanced Spanish. And I think the reason is because it's hard. You know, a lot of the time, people who do teach, they are often native speakers of the language, or people who have trained to teach the language, but who haven't necessarily been through and done it themselves in one or more or in multiple foreign languages. I have, well, I'll walk you through my CV slightly in a minute, but I have studied a lot of different languages, speak many languages to a high level, and what it takes from the learner's perspective to break through from intermediate to advanced. And so that's what makes this different, and why you should listen to what I have to say. It all comes from very hard-fought, hard-won experience. So my name is Ollie. I'm from the UK. I'd say I speak 8 languages. I have studied 10 over the years, but I speak 8 languages, many of them fluently, a few more to not such a fluent standard. It's kind of a big mix. But when I was 19, I only spoke English, so I'm kind of a late starter. So if you didn't grow up in that multilingual household, don't worry. I didn't either. I ran educational programs for the British Council for many years. I have a master's degree in linguistics. I've run language workshops around the world, most recently in London, in New York, lots of different places. I have a blog called I Will Teach You a Language, which was voted 3rd most popular language blog in the world by Lexophiles and Babbler last year, which was fantastic. I'm also a best-selling author. I've written many books, many of which have become #1 bestsellers around the world. So I have done a lot of stuff, and I spend my life working with languages, but I've also done a lot of things wrong. And I think this really is going to be some of the most valuable stuff for you, because you don't have to make the same mistakes that I've made. Now, if you know me, or if you've heard me talk before, I'm known for quite a realistic approach to language learning. I'm not one of these people that promises you fluency in a week. I do make it clear that you have to do the work. I can't do that for you. But as I said before, I can show you a fast and sensible way that's going to, if you've been languishing in the intermediate stage for a while, you're going to find this very, very valuable. And what we're going to do today in this class is take my experience of that and beating it, and show you how to apply that to your Spanish. Okay, so what you're going to get tonight is the fastest, most direct, and least stressful way to avoid the intermediate plateau and become fluent in Spanish. Does that sound good? Go ahead and type it in and let me know. I'm going to be asking you a number of questions on the call, so please do take the time to reply in the chat box. It helps me know that you are still there, but also, you know, you will, if you engage with this, I think you will get a lot more out of it. So hopefully that sounds good. Okay, just quick message from Nikki, maybe having trouble. Nikki, if you're having any, I'm sorry, Helen, if you're having any audio trouble, just please log out and then back in again, and that should fix the problems for you. Okay, so let's dive in. Now, this is a monthly language meetup that I run in London, and you know, the last time we met, we were talking about a problem that I was having in my Cantonese. I'm learning Cantonese right now, and you know, I am at a stage where I'm very much in this intermediate plateau that you're in Spanish, and so I'm working through a lot of the things at the moment in my Cantonese that you will be facing in your Spanish. Okay, some of the typical problems I have right now in my own language learning is I struggle to understand natural Cantonese when it's spoken by real people. I've taken a lot of lessons, been through a lot of books before, but I don't feel I'm improving so much. My vocabulary is okay, I guess, but I kind of lack precision and I'm not particularly articulate when I speak Cantonese. I struggle to understand Cantonese when it's spoken in groups. Started to have pipe dreams about learning other languages as well. Now, can you relate to any of these problems in your Spanish? Any of these sound familiar? Hopefully they do. Now, shortly after this meetup here, I took a trip to Thailand and I met this guy in Bangkok whose name is Stu J. Raj, fantastic polyglot, expert in Asian languages. And he speaks Cantonese as well, among many other languages. And we had an amazing afternoon with him in his place, and in a very impactful day for me, because this guy is a true expert, and he spent a few hours really telling me, I guess, answering all of my questions, all the things I was frustrated about with the language, all of the things that I was not really understanding that I felt were holding me back. I kind of went through all of these things and poured my heart out a little bit to him, and he broke those apart and told me exactly what was going on with my Cantonese learning, everything from pronunciation to tones to writing Chinese characters, all the problems that I was having. And after this chat with him that afternoon, I felt like the weight of the earth had been lifted off my shoulders. This kind of feeling of when you're learning a language and you kind of feel like you're on your own and you just can't seem to find that path through. Talking with Studio that afternoon really helped me cut through so many of the problems that I was having. And as a result, excuse me, after returning from Thailand, I've seen more progress in the last month or two than I have for a very, very long time. And it's all been because I've managed to meet someone who's been there and done that and was able to kind of lift the lid, shine a light on what's going on and help me through it. And this was an epiphany moment for me, because I really thought, well, this is what it takes. When you're struggling with something, with a big task like learning Spanish, do it all by yourself, because there's no need. Many people it's a well-trodden path. Many people have been there and done that in the past. And so this was a huge realization for me, and we'll keep coming back to this throughout the class tonight. And so when I was planning this session, really, I sat stage to fluency. And well, what are the real key things that get you through that intermediate phase? And if we boil it all down and we take out all of the nonsense of what really matters, well, there are three secrets. Number one, you need to model successful Spanish learners. Number two, communities help you avoid the single biggest danger of all. And number three, you need to study the whole language. Now, don't worry if you don't know what whole language is. We'll get to that later on. So these are the three things we're going to work through today. And let's begin with modeling successful Spanish learners. One of my favorite sayings in Chinese is this, which is 识人好過識字. And this literally means it's better to know a person than a word. Now, this will soon become clear why this is such an important thing. My biggest lessons in language learning have all been from people. They've not been from textbooks, they've been from people. And yet most people, when they're learning languages by themselves, if you're studying Spanish right now, you may well find yourself kind of browsing the internet, looking at textbooks, looking for that secret to breaking through. But actually, the biggest lessons always come from people that you meet who help you along the way. I remember when I was living in Argentina, quite some years ago, when I was first getting started with Spanish. At that time, I was my Spanish was okay, but I think when I spoke Spanish there, I did sound a bit like a gringo. I was, you know, my pronunciation was probably not very good, and my grammar was probably appalling. But over the space of a few months in Buenos Aires, I went from speaking kind of okay Spanish to really quite good and quite strong. And so I was wondering why that happened. What led to that happening? So I look back over that period of a few months, And I realized, in fact, it was far from ideal learning conditions. Most people that I would meet would never correct me when I spoke Spanish. In fact, many people often replied to me in English because they're quite cultured in Argentina. When I did get into conversations, often I wouldn't understand much because they would speak very fast in this very thick porteño accent. And, you know, as any of you know, who, if you do live in a foreign country right now, you may have noticed that actually it's not always the amazing experience for language learning that you thought it might be. And it can be demotivating sometimes if you feel a little bit isolated. So it wasn't any of these things that helped me improve my Spanish. It wasn't so much living there that helped me. And then I thought about my friend, my very good friend, Adrian. And we spent a lot of time together in Buenos Aires. We mostly spoke English, actually, but a lot of the time we did speak Spanish. We would hang out a lot. We would go to see live music, and it was cool. And, you know, he would hear me speak Spanish, and occasionally we would say a few things in Spanish. But from time to time, every now and again, he would turn around to me and he would tear down my Spanish. And he would say, look, Ollie, this is wrong, or that's wrong, you know, or Ollie, when you speak Spanish, you sound like this. And, you know, it didn't, like I said, it didn't happen very often. But when he gave me these little tear downs of my Spanish, it was really, really powerful for me. So he would say things to me like, well, you know, what, you always use the same adjectives when you speak Spanish, you know, the bueno, rico. You always use the same adjectives. Or he might say, you know, when your pronunciation, or, you know, your vowels, they all sound the same. Or, you know, when you start sentences in Spanish, they always sound unnatural. Your sentences are always unnatural at the beginning. And these things really made me like sit up and pay attention. So, for example, when he told me this last one here, your sentences start very unnaturally. I thought, what are you talking about? You know, I'm trying to speak good, polished Spanish here. What do you mean it's unnatural? But because it stuck with me, I went off and I really started to listen to how locals were speaking. I really started to listen to how locals would start their phrases. And because Adrian had told me this in such a pointed way, I made a big deal out of going off and listening to how people would start their sentences. And I noticed something interesting. I would always hear these kind of words at the beginning of sentences. Bueno, pues. See, pues they don't say in Argentina, but in the rest of the Spanish-speaking world they do. No sé, mira, a lo mejor, lo que pasa es que. Words like this. Now, I'm sure you know all of these words. They're all very simple. And I realized that, you know, when I was starting my sentences, when I would begin a conversation in Spanish, I would try to come up with some very articulate, grammatically accurate thing to say. But I realized that actually people start off in a very kind of messy, casual way. They would just say, bueno, no sé, things like that. And so as soon as I noticed that, it was one of those kind of epiphany moments, and I started copying them. And then the more I listened, the more I realized that actually a lot of the time when people start sentences, they string together a lot of these words in a kind of nonsense way. So you'll get people starting sentences like, bueno, pues no sé, mira, a lo mejor lo que pasa es que, and then they would actually say what they wanted to say. Now, what's the function of these kind of nonsense words? Because they don't really mean anything. The function is they're buying you time to think. And so this was a huge moment for me in my Spanish, because I realized actually, not only can I buy myself time to think when I'm speaking Spanish by using these words, but actually it makes me sound more fluent and more like a native speaker in the process. So when someone would ask me something like, mira, Oli, ¿por qué a los ingleses no les gusta aprender idiomas, tío? Like, why don't English people like learning languages? And so my reply would be something like, bueno, pues, no sé, mira, a lo mejor lo que pasa es que simplemente no les interesa. You know, all I said in that sentence was, well, probably they're not interested in learning languages. But actually, it sounded very natural, right? And it's because I was stringing all these words together. So I'm just going to pause for a second, and I want you just to read out these words and pretend, just copy me, do what I just did, and feel what it sounds like to actually use these words. I'll give you a few seconds to try that out. Say it out loud and experience how you can buy yourself time in this way. Now, hopefully you've noticed that immediately that makes you sound very, very natural. Okay, so from that point on, I started doing this with everything. And the only reason that I noticed this was because my friend pointed it out to me in a very direct way. So these little tips from at the end were few and far between, but they were golden, and they were always focused on speaking. So when he would give me these little tips, I would always go home and study the hell out of the stuff that he had taught me, not with books, but by listening very closely to real Spanish. And I found a massive improvement over the space of a few months, and I was able to speak a lot more naturally. So after this experience, with every language I've ever learned, I've always gone and sought out someone who's been there and done it before me and can help me direct my learning and give me these kind of small but valuable insights to improve my learning. Now, sometimes it's not always possible to go out immediately and find that kind of person, but often they are there. You just need to kind of be aware of it and then, strike when the iron's hot. So, it doesn't have to be a native speaker. Often the best kind of guides or coaches, if you like, are people, foreigners, I guess, like me, who have gone on and learned Spanish well, because they can really understand the process that you're going through. So it could be it could be a friend who's already learned Spanish, perhaps. It could be a Spanish-speaking person who has learned multiple languages themselves. It could be a language coach or something, although that can be a bit expensive. It could potentially be a teacher, although it's quite difficult to find a teacher who can really give you that kind of direct feedback. And often you can meet people like this in cultural events or language exchanges or things like that. So what I really want you to do is just to be open to this. And if you think you might have someone in your life who can give you that kind of feedback, jump on it and really ask them if they can help you out with that, because it will be one of the single most important and helpful things that you can do. I'm doing this right now with my Cantonese, with Stuje, and it's he's a model and an inspiration for me with my Cantonese, and it's helping me enormously. So to recap then, secret number one is to model successful Spanish learners, someone that you can have access to. It will make the world of difference. All right then, so let's check if you're still awake. And before we move on to the next part, I'm going to give you a word in Spanish, and I'd like you to tell me what it means in English. Okay, just a little bit of fun to keep you on your toes. So here we go. The word is complexión. Go ahead and type in the box, what does this mean in English? Now I'll give you a hint. It is what's known as a false friend or a false cognate. So the word that whatever you think it means, it's probably not. Go ahead and type it in. Let me know what you think this means, what you think complexión means in English. Let's have a look, see what you're getting. Because as that's coming in, so Edward says, interestingly, I've started learning Italian like a child, like child language acquisition, no textbooks, just continuously making mistakes. It's felt like a far more rewarding learning experience. Yeah, exactly. Jerry says, I love that tip. Everyone uses them in any language, but we don't think about it when learning another language. Yeah, exactly. All those words, right? It makes it completely natural. Okay, so a lot of people are saying complexion. Edward says anxiety. Good guess. A lot of you guys are maybe some of you are Googling, I'm not sure. All right, so I think someone had a good guess here. Let me just see. So Ivan says constitution. Yeah. Okay, so it sounds like complexion, but actually, as Ivan says, it means your physical constitution. So as in like your, if how how strong you are, how your well-being. That's what complexión means. Okay, so one of many false friends in Spanish to watch out for, and a little word to take away with you there. Okay, let's move on. Secret number 2: communities help you avoid the single biggest danger of all. Now, what is that danger? Go ahead and type in the box. From all your experience learning Spanish or other languages, what's the single biggest problem you've faced in having success? What do you think? Go ahead and let me know. Is it finding the time? Is it grammar? Is it pronunciation? What do you think it is? What would you say? Let's have a look. Okay, so Tanya says, no one around doing the same thing as me. Well, there you go. I think you've hit the nail on the head. Lots of others, though. Joey says, finding the time. Kevin says, grammar. Nikki says, people reply in English. Yes. Nikki, I wrote a massive blog post about how to get around that particular problem. It's a big one. Jerry says, time and understanding native speakers, grammar, pronunciation, vocabulary. Okay, a lot of things coming through here. Big mix, actually. Big mix, a lot of kind of grammar. Motivation, says Viv. Rachel says, having the confidence to have a go. Okay, so lots of different issues. And for everybody, it is different. You know, I have a friend called John who is lives in North London, and he's been learning Spanish for a long time, and he speaks very fluently now, actually, but he was struggling at this intermediate stage for a long time. Like me, he was really gripped by Argentina. And there was a time quite a few years ago when he was really losing motivation, and he stopped being excited about the prospect of learning Spanish, much like you may be feeling yourself right now. The thing is, John is a really, really motivated guy. He's the kind of person that can motivate himself through anything. You know, he's like that. And I remember chatting with him once about why that was happening. And we talked about, well, I told him about the intermediate illusion. And it's very much an illusion. Being at an intermediate level in Spanish or any other language is a difficult stage because you don't feel or perceive progress. You remember when you were a beginner, everything that you learned, every little word that you learned helped you speak a lot better. You know, the first few lessons you had, or the first few chapters of your textbook, you'd learn really key verbs like ir or venir, comer, pensar, kind of core verbs that you need in Spanish, and you'd learn them, and you'd be able to go off and you'd be able to use them in speaking right away. Right? It's fantastically useful. That's what happens at the beginning, and it's why being a beginner is such an exciting stage in a language, because you just feel the because you've already learned all of the key, like most frequent, say 500 or so words in a language. And what happens is you start to get to a stage where you have a lot more to learn, but it doesn't necessarily contribute to you actually improving your level in the language or improving your ability to communicate like you could when you were just starting out. Okay, you get into these, what you start to learn is how to be a bit more precise, a bit more articulate, how to express finer shades of meaning. So for example, if I asked you how to say in Spanish, I'd like you to go to the bank. Go ahead and type in how you might say that phrase in Spanish. I'd like you to go to the bank. Take a second and type that into the box. You can use any you can use usted or tú, doesn't really matter. So just have a stab at it. How would you say that in Spanish? I'd like you to go to the bank. A fairly intermediate-ish phrase. You're asking someone else to do something, but it's not as straightforward as it seems. Okay, so Grace says, quiero que tú vas al banco. Edward says, querría que ibas al banco. Kevin says, me gusta para tú ir al banco. Okay, we've got a lot of different variations on the theme. Most of them not correct, actually. There was one correct one I've seen there so far. Okay, Heidi's got it. Johan's got it. Okay, so let's have a look. There are a number of ways of saying this, but the most direct way is probably saying, quiero que vayas al banco. Quiero que vayas al banco. You don't need to say tú because it's understood from the second verb, from the vayas. Now, many of you said vas, as in tú vas, you go. But actually, when you use the verb quiero, or you have a desire of some kind, when you express a desire or a wish, you need to use the subjunctive because it hasn't happened yet. Okay, so this is why you need to say quiero que vayas al banco. So it may be the case that at intermediate stage you learn this, but then you go on to the next however many chapters in your textbook and you realize that there are different ways of expressing the subjunctive. So then you might look on the next page and you might discover that another way of saying this would be me gustaría que fueras al banco. Okay, so instead of quiero, you've got me gustaría, which is obviously more polite. And then because you're using me gustaría, you then have to change the subjunctive verb to for. You're learning stuff all the time. You really are. You're learning how to use different kinds of grammar. You're learning new vocabulary. You are learning. It just doesn't feel like it. You're learning all the time, but it just doesn't feel like it because it's not. You're not learning entirely new things, new ways of expressing yourself. So all he had to do in that situation was to keep going. And it's a real psychological thing that someone mentioned earlier that they felt like they were on their own. That's exactly it. It can be a very lonely time, you know, when no one around you understands why you're learning Spanish in the first place. You're learning endless variations on grammar, conjugations of verbs. It can feel like a bit of a dark time sometimes. But actually, you are progressing. It just doesn't feel like it. So I asked John, like, what are you doing to learn? How are you studying? And basically, he was sat in his bedroom in North London studying by himself. That's all he was doing. He's a motivated guy, independent learner. He was doing it all by himself. What he needed more than anything else was not to be alone. He needed to get out and use the language with other people for a real purpose. You know, when you are around other people who are learning Spanish, their enthusiasm is infectious. It makes you study more. Sometimes, you know, I go to a lot of language exchanges and I often meet people who have just started learning a new language a few weeks ago, and they're so happy and they're so excited. And I kind of think, well, wow, at what point did I lose that crazy enthusiasm? You know, if you feel lonely, if you feel that nobody around you really understands what you're doing or you don't have any support, do you think you're going to be at your best? Are you going to do good work? Of course you're not. It doesn't work that way. You have to feel positive in order to really learn effectively. When you're surrounded by other people, you get answers to questions. You get ideas and inspiration. And community, ultimately, is life. Human connection. That's why we're doing this thing. That's why we're doing it. You know, you're not learning Spanish to sit in your bedroom and read books. I mean, some people do, but most of us want to actually communicate and speak with people in a way that we can feel like we are being our authentic selves when we speak Spanish, to be ourselves, you know. So I told this to John, I said, man, you have to get out. You have to stop. You have to get it out of your head, off the page, and go to actually use it with other people. That's the next step for you. You have to put what you're doing into practice. So John went out and he joined a lot of local meetups, Spanish meetups. He went to language exchanges. I think he signed up to some kind of local Spanish study group or something. I think he even took group lessons actually to try and meet other people doing the same thing as him. He tried a lot of different things, and I remember seeing him sometime after that, and his Spanish the change was incredible. and he's now completely fluent. He has a girlfriend from, I think they're even getting married, and he's very much living the language. What he didn't do was wait until he was ready and then start to live the language. Do you ever feel like you're kind of waiting for some moment in the future until you're ready to speak Spanish? It's a dangerous game because, you know, the time is now. What was very interesting was that when we spoke about this afterwards, what John said to me was, you know, Ollie, it's not, when I went out and started surrounding myself with other people learning Spanish, it's not that I learned a ton of Spanish from these people, because it wasn't really like that, but they got me excited and they kept me going long enough to be successful. And that was the power of community for John. And there are many, many places you can go to do this. Depending on where you live, you may have local language exchanges, you know, these big events where people get together and practice languages. That might not be for you if you're not particularly outgoing, but they're usually very friendly and supportive. There are, if you Google Spanish Society or Spanish events, there'll be lots of things going on there. You can always sign up to a class. I'm not a big fan of kind of sit-down language classes with lots of other students in the class, but they can be great to meet other people and get inspiration. So there's lots of different ways of doing it. And the main point about this is by having a community around you, they help you avoid the single biggest danger of all. John could have almost given up on his Spanish, and he probably thought about it more than a few times, but he didn't, because he went out and he found people who would push him through that kind of dark moment. So if you're feeling like you're on your own at the moment in Spanish, or you're not getting inspired, don't underestimate the importance of this. If you can find those people to help you kind of rekindle that passion for the language, that is where your progress is going to come from. Okay, so hopefully that's striking a few nerves at the moment. I have, in all the languages that I've become fluent in myself, I've never done it without a community around me. A couple of times where my language, I've learned a language and it has fallen by the wayside, it's because I've never had a genuine reason to use it, and I haven't been surrounded by other people. Okay, it's crucially important. Okay, so that's secret number 2. Let's move on to the next quick test here. We've got a word in Spanish, and I'd like you to go ahead and type in what you think this means in English. The word is introducir. Introducir. In case you're wondering about my accent, by the way, my accent is a kind of mainly from the Canary Islands. I learned a lot of Spanish from good friends of mine in the Canary Islands. So I don't pronounce it as you might in Spain, which would be introducir. I don't say that myself, but it's also perfectly valid. So what does this mean? Go ahead and type it in. Again, it's another false friend, as I'm sure you know. So Tanya says, just Googled language exchange in my local town and can already see a potential match. Thanks, didn't realize this existed. Tanya, this is the beginning. I'm so excited for you because you're going to, well, just wait and see. Edward is laughing at the subjunctive. You have to laugh at it really, Edward, because otherwise it's getting just depressing. Okay, now Edward knows the phrase introduce su tarjeta por favor. So this is a great example of how actually using it means to helps you actually know the language. Okay, Ivan has a guess that I won't repeat. So yeah, a lot of you guys have got this one actually. So it sounds like to introduce, as in John, this is Mark. Mark, this is John. But actually, it means to insert. Oh, sorry, I've got an old word here. You can ignore that one. So yeah, so introducir means to insert. All right then, so number 3, study the whole language. This is my favorite part because this is the point where we actually get to talk about language study, because you may have been surprised perhaps that in the, we're not talking about grammar here. And that's very intentional. Grammar is something that people worry about a lot, and grammar is crucially important. Never let it be said that Ollie says that grammar is not important, because it is. You do need grammar. The problem with grammar is that it's such a huge thing. It's such a huge task to quote unquote learn grammar, that and also it's the kind of thing that lends itself very well to study and to teaching. It tends to get taught and studied disproportionately. Grammar is the kind of thing that is best learned as a byproduct of actually using the language. Again, this is what we'll get onto. So, you know, as I said before, I'm very much about the practicalities of language learning, and it cannot be just sitting down with your books. People who become fluent in a language do not do it on their own. They go out and they have people to help them, as in secret number one. They have communities to keep going and to galvanize them. That's secret number two. Tanya's already found the language exchange. I'm so excited to see what you're going to do with this, Tanya. But obviously, we do need to talk about the language, and what we need to talk about in order to move from intermediate to advanced is the whole language. Now, what is this? Well, this is a picture of me in Japan. I lived in Japan for 3.5 years, and we spoke earlier, right, about how when you're a beginner, it feels great when you're learning Spanish, right? You do a little bit of study, and it's insanely useful. You make lots of progress very quickly, but then at intermediate stage, things change, right? Now, because things change at intermediate stage, you have to do things differently from when you're a beginner, okay? And this is crucially important. When you reach the intermediate stage, you have to study in a different way to how you studied when you were a beginner. And actually, I've just written a very long article in the Huffington Post about exactly this. Maybe I'll try and send this to you guys later on. But I didn't know this. No one ever told me this. You know, no one ever tells you how to learn, how to study a language, right? They just give you the grammar exercises. So my problems in Japan were really, well, they epitomized my struggles with the intermediate plateau in general. When I first arrived in Japan, I did everything. I studied in a school. I had a teacher. I got loads of books. And it was great when I was a beginner because I learned very quickly, made lots of quick progress. But as soon as I got beyond that beginner stage, after say a year of being in Japan, I stopped getting results. My progress ground to a halt. And my speaking, which is what I was most interested in, I wanted to speak Japanese, not just read it. I wanted to speak the thing. It stopped improving. And that kind of stagnated for a good year or so whilst I was in Japan, probably more. And it became very, very frustrating because I was there. I wanted to learn Japanese, but I was just stuck. I was plateauing and I wasn't improving. So if you've ever heard me talk before, you might have heard this story about what I did in Japan. And what I did at that point was I said, okay, I need to go and spend all of my time speaking. I'm going to scrap studying and I'm just going to go and speak a lot. And I did. And I actually improved very, very quickly. I had another one of those experiences where over the course of 2 or 3 months, I really propelled my Japanese forward. And I used to think that it happened as a result of doing a lot of speaking. And obviously that helps. But now I realize, having been through it this stage more times and having coached people through it many more times now, I realize that there's actually much more to it. You see, I was so frustrated at that point after 2 years, 2.5 years or so in Japan and not improving, that I just said, okay, I'm going to make my own materials. None of the books that I got, none of the classes I attended were really helping. I would learn a little bit here and a little bit there, but it was always very much kind of tangential to what I really wanted to be doing. It wasn't really helping me make big steps forward. So I set about making my own materials, and I realized now that this is what I call the whole language. And it was the fact that I learned the whole language that helped me progress through that intermediate stage and become fairly fluent in Japanese in a short space of time. And this is the kind of thing that I would do with my speaking partners or my tutors. I would ask them to write scripts for me. So, for example, I would say to them, look, I want to be able to describe my work in Japanese. Can you write a script out for me? And they would do that. I would then ask them to hey, can you record that for me, please? And I would record them on my phone, literally just reading aloud the script they'd just written for me. I would go off and I'd memorize that. I would start to send emails and texts to friends in Japanese. Even though we'd normally just speak in English, I would just insist on emailing and texting them in Japanese. I would start to read blogs online, write comments, find graded readers so I could start to read slightly simplified Japanese. And at the time, this was kind of born out of frustration, and I just wanted to, I thought to myself, I want to learn the real language. I don't want to learn anything else from a book. I want to learn what people actually say. And so I basically went and asked them, and I spent tons of time creating my own materials like these. Okay, my own custom study materials. Now, the reason this worked was every time I sat down to study, I would see the language being used in real life, not from a textbook, not from a grammar practice book, but in real life. And what that meant was, as I studied, my learning was unlimited. I was exposed to so many more words and phrases and grammar points naturally through context. And I had the confidence of knowing that I was learning what real people actually say in Japanese. And this is really the most powerful learning method of all. Now, you can't do it as a beginner because there's too much you don't know yet. But at your stage, where you're at in Spanish, you can start to do this. Okay, now, you can still use textbooks and stuff, but the principle is that you work from the whole language being used. Now, 3 years or so after this actually happened, I now realize why that worked. Okay, so let's have a more detailed look at this. Now, as a beginner, you have to learn your basic knowledge, your basic verbs, basic grammar, and then put it into use in speaking. So it works, right? You study a bit, and then you can say those things. At intermediate, each thing you learn becomes less useful, right? So what's going to happen if you keep studying the same way as a beginner? Is basically learn a new word, try and use it. Learn another new word, try and use it. Learn a new grammar point, try and use it. I dare say that's how you might be studying right now. Okay, but what's going to happen if you keep studying that way at intermediate level? Well, there's simply too much to learn, and it doesn't make enough difference. Like we said before, finer shades of meaning, right? So there's too much there for you to keep studying in that way. What you need to do is to turn it on its head and do exactly what I did in Japan. So you start to use the language. You write out scripts, you record them, you rehearse them, you read and write emails, you read graded readers, you do all these different things to actually use the whole language being used. Now, when you use it, you start to notice things. You start to think, okay, what's that word? Or what's that? Why is that grammar being used like that? So you notice things, and then you sit down and you study those things. It's the reverse of the above process, okay? You use the language, and then you notice how it's being used, and you study it. That's what I did in Japan, and this is the secret. Because then you unlock the potential of unlimited learning, because you're immersing yourself in the language. Now, once you get to this kind of intermediate level, does this make sense, by the way? Go ahead and let me know if this is making sense to you. Once someone reaches an intermediate level, like where you're at now, there are kind of generally two camps of people. Okay, camp number one are people who need to use Spanish for work, for example, or with family who don't speak any English or something like that. And they are forced to use the language every day. And as a result of speaking, listening, reading, writing, they quickly move on to become fluent. Okay, that is one possibility, one thing that might happen to you depending on your circumstances at this stage in Spanish. However, most of us don't have that. Most of us don't have that possibility. I live in the UK and I'm learning foreign languages. I don't have much opportunity to use them on a kind of immersion basis here in the UK. So most of us don't have this fortunate situation. And so when you're in that situation where you don't have to use the language every day, you never move forward. And why does that happen? Well, you know how it feels to have studied a lot of Spanish, but not to feel like you can actually speak more fluently, right? Or to, you know what it feels like to still be lost or overwhelmed when you talk with native speakers. Well, how do you expect to beat that when you still got your head in the books? You can't. And that was my realization in Japan. That's why I had to take it back to the whole language and actually using it first and studying it in reverse. Those are the two camps. It's you have if you don't have the luxury of really using Spanish every day to force you to improve, then you've got to imitate that as much as possible by studying the whole language and then studying that in reverse. Okay, so secret number 3 is to study the whole language, or to put it another way, in more kind of blunt terms, stop studying and learn the whole language instead. Okay, listen, you have enough knowledge already in Spanish. I guarantee you do. I've seen it time and time again. You just need to activate it to break through to become more fluent. Okay. Yes, you have to speak a lot, but you probably know that already. You need more at intermediate level. Instead of just studying or just speaking, at intermediate level, what you've got to do is this. You've got to read and speak and listen and watch and laugh and love in Spanish. That's what you've got to do. That's the secret, even if it feels hard. And then as you're reading, speaking, listening, watching, laughing, and loving in Spanish, you capture it, like I did with my recordings and my emails and things like that. And then you study the stuff that you capture. It's a different way of working, right? It's a very different way of working to what you're used to. But this is what it takes. All right? So, model successful Spanish learners. Find a community that will help you avoid the single biggest danger of all. And study the whole language. This, guys, this is the secret to breaking through the intermediate plateau. Can you see how powerful this is? With secret number 1, it's expert guidance to discover which things about your Spanish will improve your speaking right now. Like what Adrian said to me about starting my sentences more naturally. Secret number 2, it's a community that will help keep you excited, to help you find everything that you need to study and to make Spanish a part of your life. And then lastly, it's using the whole language to study real Spanish and unlock the unlimited potential of your learning. And listen, it's worth it, right? To be able to speak Spanish without freezing up, to feel like you actually belong when you're speaking and you're not an outsider, have Spanish as part of your daily life, with friends to chat to and friends who won't just speak to you in Spanish, but who want to chat to you in Spanish because it's more comfortable than English, or because your Spanish is so good that you can have a perfectly normal conversation just in Spanish. That reaction from people when when you're traveling abroad and they think you're a tourist, and maybe you are, but you turn around and you speak to them like a local, the look in their eyes when that happens. And if you have friends or relatives who speak Spanish, the look in their eyes when they realize that you've gone to all this effort to make communication possible in Spanish, like, it's something special, and this is what it's all about. So I encourage you to keep going through, however hard it may seem. Okay, so I hope the past hour has been useful. The secrets I've shown you are not hard, but they do require you to think and plan and take action. Okay, even if you just choose one of these secrets and implement it, I guarantee you'll see a big improvement in your Spanish. I've seen it every time, without fail, when I have been at this stage in a foreign language. Okay, so I hope that's been useful for you. The weekly planner that I told you about will be in your inbox within 24 hours. I have it set up to go out automatically, so it might take a bit of time. You should expect it by tomorrow. And so we've reached the end of the class here, but there is a little bit more I'd like to tell you, because I really wish that I'd had a shortcut myself. When I was going through this, when I was in Japan, I created all my own materials with the listening and the reading and all of that, and I spent tons of money on all these textbooks I never used, and I spent hours with teachers and language partners helping me with vocabulary and pronunciation and things like that, and I was basically figuring it all out by myself. And I really wish that back then I'd had a shortcut, because it would have saved me so much time and antagony. And it is the three things that we've covered today. It's a mentor who had already learned the language, a community to help me keep going and not feel alone, and then materials to study the whole language. So if you're lacking these things at the moment in your Spanish, then I feel your pain. Okay, I've been there more times than I care to remember. So you're not alone. I want you to know that. So from my side, for the last few months, what I've been doing is I've turned my focus on my website specifically to Spanish, and creating one amazing resource to help people like you who are stuck at this frustrating intermediate stage in Spanish to get exactly these three things right here that you can see on the screen, so that you can cut out this pain and frustration that I went through and take the shortest possible route to speaking fluent Spanish. So I'd like to take a second now to tell you about this, because there's a golden opportunity right now to get involved, and it's super exciting and only available to people on this class here. It's called the Fluent Spanish Academy, and it's a private community run by me for people stuck at an intermediate level of Spanish to help you break through and become fluent. Now, there's a lot of stuff inside the academy, but there are a few major things that you get as an academy member. The first thing is coaching and guidance from me personally, and with all the activity and training that we've got inside the academy, I'm there every day guiding you, making sure you know what you're doing. All right, now remember my friend Adrian in Argentina that I told you about? Well, that's what I'm providing for you here, whether it's answering your questions in the forums or giving you detailed feedback on videos you've uploaded of you speaking Spanish, which some people do from time to time. I'm there for you. I also deliver a live training class every month where I teach you how to study better, how to become a better language learner, and where I give you something very clear to focus on in your study over the following month that helps you keep your eye on the ball when it comes to studying Spanish at the intermediate level. Now, inside the academy, you're joining a huge community of other people just like you around the world who are dedicated to becoming fluent in Spanish. They keep each other motivated, asking and answering questions. Groups as well around the world, which is great, and we've got people giving movie recommendations and things like that, so it's very, very cool. And just with the guidance from me and the community that's there inside the academy, you've got a very, very powerful cocktail. It's all the things that we spoke about in the lesson tonight. But you remember the other thing that you need, the third thing? Remember in Japan, I had to go out and make all of my own materials, and everything I found before was either far too easy or far too hard, and I wasted a lot of time and energy. So what you get in the academy as well is tailor-made materials that I've made and created personally that are aimed specifically at helping you through the intermediate plateau, so that you have everything you need to study Spanish each week. And the entire purpose of the academy really is to create an entire ecosystem for intermediate level Spanish, so that you don't have to go anywhere else and you have everything you need. Okay. Now, what I'm actually going to try and do here is actually show you inside the academy. I think we should be able to do this. Bear with me for a second, and hopefully I'm going to be able to open this up and show you inside, because that'll give you a great idea of what it's about. Here we go. So this is inside the members area of the Fluent Spanish Academy, and you have a lot of news here where you stay updated with what's going on. Now, when you first join, you have a starter course, and The starter course is basically a complete training course where you learn all about the intermediate plateau. So it's understanding the difficulties you're having right now and exactly what to do to break through. Because there are a number of different difficulties, if you like, at intermediate stage. And so the Academy Starter course is the complete path through the intermediate plateau. Everything from how to break through, understanding your level, specific study routines that you should use every day to study. So that's the first thing that you go through in the Academy. After this, we have the Fluent Spanish classes, and these are actually members' favorite parts to the Academy. And what you get is every week, you get a brand new lesson with me. It's an audio lesson that I deliver. And in this lesson, you have a dialogue, which is we carefully construct around words and phrases that are actually used in Spanish. So you learn things that are actually used by real people. And so often it really frustrates me when you see inside textbooks, they give you and they teach you stuff that you're never going to want to use. What I've done is I've been through and I've distilled the language, the words and phrases that you need to communicate with real people and put them together into these weekly lessons. And people love these because often someone just said the other week that they were really, really happy because they'd learned something from one of these weekly lessons, and the day after they'd gone out and they'd heard someone use that and they knew exactly how to respond to it. So it's very, very practical training that comes with the audio and the lesson notes as well. Struggles with understanding native speakers at real speed, then the listening comprehension training is something that you're going to love, because what we have here is real conversations between Spanish speakers from around the world. So you strengthen your ear by being able to understand people from whatever type of Spanish they speak. And the real conversations between different Spanish speakers fully transcribed with the audio and the transcription. So you can actually listen to real people speaking Spanish and follow along with the transcript, which is the best way to improve your ability to understand native speakers. Again, we've got lots of these. Grammar Central is my approach to teaching grammar. Now, I know that you've been through lots of grammar books before and you've done grammar exercises. My way of teaching grammar is different. I give you stories to read. I give you short stories that have been specifically written to help you practice particular grammar points in Spanish. So this story here, for example, is all about the subjunctive. So you're going to read this story that's full of natural examples of the subjunctive being used in the story. You can read along and listen to the MP3 recording at the same time, and it's the most efficient way of learning grammar. We've also got the live training directory where this is the lesson you get every month. So I deliver a live coaching call where I teach you one of my favorite strategies for becoming a better language learner, and that's what we do live every month, a little bit like this class. And then in the other resources section, we have all hundreds of movie recommendations, useful articles, things like that. So it really is absolutely everything that you need to break through the plateau. Now, let me just quickly move back to the main screen here. Yeah, so that gives you a kind of inside look into the Academy. What I want to prevent from happening anymore is these kind of feelings. If you feel like I freeze up when I speak because you don't know how to reply properly, I can't understand natural Spanish spoken by real people or in groups because you don't practice listening in the right way. I can't speak with accurate grammar because you haven't learned grammar the natural way, or I'm frustrated by my lack of expression in Spanish because you're not learning the way people really speak. If you feel these things, the Academy is designed for you. Now, I'm sure you're wondering about the cost of the Fluent Spanish Academy. The full price for the Academy is $97 a month, which reflects the high amount of kind of personal attention and involvement you get. There are no contracts. You can cancel at any time. It's very transparent, but you're not going to pay that today because, as I said earlier, there's a special opportunity at the moment for people who attend my classes online. But I just want to get this in perspective a little bit because I know that you're obviously here because you want to break through where you're at in Spanish now and become fluent. I want you just to imagine if you did join at the full rate of $97 a month and you stayed for 1 year and you worked hard and you achieved your dream of becoming fluent in Spanish, which is the entire purpose of the Academy. Would that be worth $1,164, which is that's what will be the 12-month price if you signed up there. Would it be worth that, bearing in mind that private lessons, if you took a private lesson with a teacher twice a week, ends up costing over $5,000 a year anyway? So would it be worth $1,164? I mean, yeah, it would. It would be worth 10 times that if the result that you get is fluency in Spanish. But what I really want to do is make sure that you here, after being with me on this class, if you're still paying attention, then you are exactly the kind of person that I'm looking for, because I know that you're committed. So what I'd like to do is something really, really special here for you today. The full year membership at the monthly rate is $1,164. You're not going to pay that today. What I'd like to offer you is to try a 6-month membership of the Academy at 1/3 of the price. Okay, so it's 2/3 off, and that works out at only $197 for the 6 months. Okay, so it's a huge discount on the full price. But even better than that, if after the 6-month trial period you decide that you want to continue with the Academy, then rather than continuing at the full rate of $97 a month, you can also decide to continue for only $33.50 a month, which is also 1/3 of the price. It's like a 1/3 a 1/3 promotion here. Okay, so because you're still here, I know that you're keen. I know that you are the ideal person I'd like to welcome into the Academy. So that's why I'm very keen to make you this special offer. Okay, so it's 6 months membership at 1/3 of the price. So that's only $197. And then the option to continue after the 6 months, if you want, and you don't have to, you're free to cancel at any time, for only $33.50 a month. So a reminder of what you get inside the Academy: it's the live training with me every month, it's the community forums, it's the weekly Fluent Spanish classes, it's the listening comprehension training, it's the short stories. Don't do this alone. I know that you know what it feels like to be doing this alone. Let me help you. Come and join the community to keep you motivated. This is everything that you need to break through the intermediate plateau in Spanish and become fluent with no more stress and no more worry. Yes, you have to do the work, but it's all here for you. Now, just to put this in perspective, I was working this out earlier. With this particular offer, membership to the Academy costs $1 a day. Now, I don't know how much you spend on on your cappuccinos every day. I certainly spend quite a lot more than that. For $1 a day, to achieve your dreams of speaking fluent Spanish, is it not worth a shot for this kind of rate? Hopefully, you'll agree that it is. If you'd like to take me up on the offer, you'd like to try out the Fluent Spanish Academy, there's a button that's going to appear on your screen right now. You can click that button. That will take you through to a place where you can register. Alternatively, you can open up a new browser window, and you can go to iwillteachyoualanguage.com, which is my website, /special. Those are the two places that you can sign up. You can click the button at the edge of the screen, or you can open up a new browser window and go to iwillteachyoualanguage.com /special. Now, there are, as I said, many other people in the Academy. I want to introduce you very quickly to a couple of them. This is Judy from the USA, and she said recently, I wanted you to know that I'm thrilled with the Fluent Spanish Academy. I love Grammar Central and the pronunciation training. The forums are a great place for shared information, and working with Angela is a dream. On the technical side, I very much appreciate your prompt and personal replies to my email and to openness to feedback. Also, Mike from Washington says, I'm very impressed with your site. I love getting weekly lessons and having digestible chunks of information and audio easily available. Truly excellent materials here, Ollie. You and Angela have a definite gift for teaching and clearly presenting information. There is so much stuff on the internet, and it's nice to have an orderly site to go to which actually teaches material in a clear, concise way. So sorry for taking the time to read through those two things, but I wanted you to know that you're not alone, and there are many other people there inside the Academy. So again, quick recap. You can try 6 months of the Fluent Spanish Academy at only 1/3 of the price, so that's $197. And then there's the option to continue after 6 months if you would like. And again, it's not obligatory. You can cancel if you like. But if you would like to continue, you have the option to continue for only $33.50 a month, which is Get about $1 a day, and it's 1/3 of the regular price. There are no contracts. You can cancel anytime, and there are no hidden charges whatsoever. Again, if these are the things that you're feeling, my vocabulary is okay, but I lack precision and I overuse the same words. I struggle to understand when I'm reading. I'm losing my motivation. I can't find material that's just right for me. I've begun to doubt whether I'm capable of ever speaking Spanish fluently. Again, the Academy is designed for you. You can click the button on the side of the screen right now to get involved, and you get instant access. You can start diving in straight away with that orientation course. Alternatively, use the link on the screen, open up a new browser window, and go into iwillteachyoualanguage.com/special. There's the link again. I'm very, very happy to stay on and take questions from you guys about anything you've heard on the call tonight. I'm happy to stay for as long as you like, as many questions as you got, so go ahead and type it into the box there. There are so many things that I know people often ask lots of different questions about language learning or Spanish in general. Or if you have any particular questions about the Fluent Spanish Academy, very happy to answer those as well. So go ahead and type any questions you have into the box. I should probably have another one of those little Spanish false friend tests here at the end, but I ran out of them. Maybe I'll put a new one in. So I'm just going to pause for a second to take a swig of water, as my throat's a bit parched, and then I'll dive in and answer any of your questions. Okay, question here from John. How do you recommend learning Spanish grammar beyond intermediate stage? Okay, great question. Now, well, kind of as I mentioned earlier, the common thing amongst everybody who has studied Spanish for a while is that you have spent a lot of time studying grammar, learning rules, doing grammar exercises, right? Now, if that worked, then all of us would have perfect Spanish grammar. But of course it doesn't, because rules are okay to a point and they're helpful to a point, but really the way that you become fluent in Spanish and use authentic Spanish grammar the way that a native speaker would is to actually understand grammar the way that a native Spanish speaker would. And so what you need to do is to consume material through listening and reading that shows you real Spanish being used. And if you do that enough, then you get to see, you very quickly start to instinctively understand how grammar is used, and that transfers into your speaking. Okay. Now, the difficulty is that a lot of the material that you find is at native level, so it's too difficult. And so that's specifically why inside the Academy we have the short stories that are written on one particular grammar point, because they give you lots and lots of practice at that. And so that's exactly why I designed that, in order to help you learn grammar in a different, more natural, more fun way. The stories are really fun, actually. So you get to enjoy reading Spanish, and also the fact that you can listen along to the audio as well means that you can listen in the car or whatever. And so I would really encourage you to, instead of having a kind of rule-first approach to learning grammar, again, study the whole language and then look up particular grammar points when you want to. Okay, let's see if we have any more questions here. Keith asks, how much does this work out into pound sterling? Well, Keith, are we in a pre or post-Brexit world? The pound actually rose today, amazingly. It's not what it used to be. It's probably, I guess, around £160 sterling. I don't have an exact figure. Probably at the moment it's changing by the day, isn't it? But it's going to be around that mark, $150, $160 probably. Okay. Oh, okay, so someone's asking for music recommendations. I personally love listening to tango, Argentine tango. That's my favorite thing to listen to, but it's not everyone's cup of tea. I understand that. I would go by whatever style of music you like most, and every Spanish-speaking country has a different style of music, isn't it? And so I would kind of pick, if you live in Spain, then check out flamenco. If you are in Colombia, you could listen to cumbia. There's tango in Argentina. I would kind of go by the music that's there's bolero in Mexico, of course, salsa across the Spanish-speaking world. I would pick the music of the language, the country that you're most interested in, and really just look up music from that place. That's probably the best thing to do. Spanish music is very, very romantic usually, and so it's got lots of great, rich vocab in there to use. Okay. Sylvia asks, do you do this in Italian? Sylvia, unfortunately, I don't. I would like to in the future. I obviously like to kind of replicate this in many languages, but there's only so much, only so many hours in the day, so unfortunately, no. But I do have a number of short story books in Italian for beginners and intermediate level. If you shoot me an email, I'm very happy to send you a link to those. But certainly the tips that we've talked about here are relevant in exactly the same way to Italian, because they are exactly the same language. Okay, Pete says, I have real trouble understanding Spanish when it's spoken quickly. Yes, that kind of machine gun Spanish phenomenon, right? Well, listen, the only way to learn to understand Spanish when it's spoken quickly is to be able to pick apart the words and tell the words apart, because often when Spanish speakers speak, a lot of the words get swallowed, right? And you're not sure exactly what it is. So, so what we do in the academy, and again, the reason I created this, because I couldn't find this stuff elsewhere on the internet, is to have real conversations between native speakers recorded and transcribed, basically. It's very common on the internet to find these kind of fake, stale plastic conversations that have been scripted. No good. You need to work with authentic Spanish being spoken by real people. So in the academy, we have multiple sections with conversations between two native Spanish speakers with the audio recording and the full transcription. And simply what you do is you practice listening and reading at the same time. That helps you form the connections between what you hear and what you read. And that's the most powerful way to understand native Spanish speakers, bar none. It's what I spend most of my time doing at the moment in Cantonese, and it's extremely effective. You've also got to make sure you're speaking a lot as well, because listening it's not just a receptive thing. It works both ways. When you're speaking, listening is also a speaking skill, and vice versa, right? Because that's what interaction is all about. Tanya says, thank you. It's been lovely to connect with like-minded people. Looking forward to checking out your site when my Spanish gets to that level. Yeah, well, best of luck, Tanya. And I hope the meetup as well works out. Definitely let me know how the meetup goes. Really excited for you. Okay, I think that's all the questions so far. So if you have any final questions, go ahead and let me know. Otherwise, I believe that's it. Muchas gracias por su atención. Fue un placer enorme hablar con ustedes hoy y miren, muchísima suerte con su español en el futuro. Okay? Thanks very much, guys. Have a fantastic day. If you have any further questions, feel free to email me. You can reply to any of the emails you've received up to this point, and I'll get back to you. Graham says, thanks very much. I'm inspired. Awesome. Great to hear, Graham. Fantastic. It's what it's all about, Like we said, like I told my friend John, you are learning, you are improving. I guarantee it. It just doesn't feel like it. So guys, keep going. Surround yourself with like-minded people. I'd love to have you inside the academy. We've got tons of those people right there to help you push forward. Edward says, thank you very much. Thank you, Edward, as well. And I'll see you all very soon.